Good evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in Guyana over the past week or so. And as is the norm, Guyana being a dynamic society that it is, there are always a huge number of issues worthy of discussion. Tonight is no different. I want to begin by extending good evening greetings to all our viewers who are joining us in Region 5, West Coast Bobis. Good evening and welcome to another program of Issues in the News. To those of you who are joining us on television in Region 6, east bank of the Berbice River, New Amsterdam, Kanji, and along the coast, the Quarantine Coast, good evening, and good evening to those of you who are joining us on Freedom Radio from Rob Street, Georgetown. Good evening, and last but not least, good evening to all of you, tens of thousands of you who are joining us on Facebook Live across the length and breadth of Guyana. And I can't begin to call the communities because persons are complaining that I am leaving them out. So, all across Guyana, every corner of the country, joining us on Facebook Live, welcome and good evening. And to those of you who are joining us from outside of Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, Asia, and as far as Australia, welcome to another program of Issues in the News. Permit me to offer my apologies for not being on for the past 2 weeks, and that is because I was engaged in the National Assembly in our budget debates to ensure the passage of the 2023 budget. Hence, my not being able to host the program. But we are back. The budget was passed, and significantly, the budget presented you, all of you, with an opportunity of seeing the difference between the opposition and the government on display. The difference in philosophy, the difference in presentation, the difference in leadership, the difference in ideology, the difference in approach to work, and in many other endeavors and facets. You would have had a first-hand opportunity of viewing the two sides, and you will agree with me that it was like chalk to cheese, the government when compared with the opposition. Significantly, the opposition was hardly present. Now, I have often spoken about this, and I must continue to speak about this, if only because the opposition represents an important constituency in this country, a constituency that is deserving of better leadership and more responsible representation in the House and indeed at every level in the society. The Parliament is one of the highest fora for that type of representation. And when you look across the aisle to the opposition benches, they are hardly even present. And that is throughout the day. As it gets later, it becomes worse. By the time 8 in the evening, almost every one of them would have left and gone home. And we would stay in that parliament till after 10 p.m. most nights. The front benchers, the back benchers, they are not even present. The leader of the opposition attended, I don't know how many days, very few days. This is the leader. This is the example that they are setting. The entire front benches, most of the time, are empty. And not that they are outside, they are not in the precincts of the National Assembly. They decide to stay home, simply do not turn up. When you are in that level of leadership, that is simply not acceptable. The people who elected them deserve better representation at that high level. And you don't have to listen to me. Go back and look at the images of the parliamentary debates. And I speak here to opposition supporters as well. Go back and look at the images of the opposition benches while the parliamentary budget debates were ongoing. And you determine for yourself whether that is the type, quality, and level of representation that you deserve as a people. I think that you deserve better, but it's a matter for you. And when they were required to present now, when you listen to the quality of their presentations, some of them collided, some of them say that the budget has nothing for no one, some of them say that the budget only caters for the rich, some of them say that the budget caters only for friends and families of the PPP. I don't know how a new bridge across the Berbice River will cater for my friends and my family. I don't know how 11,000 house lots will be for my friends and family. I don't know how a four-lane highway along the railway embankment along the east coast of Damarara would be for my friends and family. And I can go on to show you how. The Gas to Shore project, the stadium, the various hotels, and all they can stand there and say is either the budget has nothing or it is for friends and family or for rich and the poor has nothing. The budget, the sheer injection of 780 odd billion into the Guyanese economy, the largest fiscal injection into Guyana's economy ever. The sheer injection of that money will create atomic economic, financial, and social impact. Just the expenditure of the money. And these people are saying yet that this budget has nothing for no one. But you heard their presentation. Fortunately, it didn't have an impact on any class of the society. As far as I am aware, they may have some hardline supporters, but I don't know what it will take to change the minds of those people. But all we can say on the side of the government, that we will work every day to implement that budget. And it's a lot to implement. And every single Guyanese will benefit from the implementation of that budget, because it is a budget that is calculated, intended, crafted, conceived, and designed to impact the lives and livelihood of every single citizen, whichever rung of the ladder you occupy, from the richest to the poorest. That is the type of budget we craft. And yes, there is an emphasis, and there will always be an emphasis in PPP's budget. And that emphasis is towards the poor and the disadvantaged in our society. We will always exercise a bias in favor of the poor and the disadvantaged. And our budget of 2023 is no different. It has that bias, and for that bias, we plead guilty. We have no apologies for that, because the vulnerable must receive the most help in our country. Not that we are discriminating, but if we are, then so be it. That is how we will discriminate in favor of the vulnerable and the disadvantaged in our society, because they need the assistance more than the other segments of our population. So I just thought that I would express some preliminary views, very cursory remarks regarding the budget, and it is passed now, and we have to assiduously work towards implementation. The president is leading the charge from the front, and that is why he took the office of the president into Region 6 over the past few days. And that you will see unfolding in every ministry right across the length and breadth of our country as we continue to take government to the people. I have been saying from 2020 repeatedly that our government will not sit in air-conditioned offices in the urban centers. That is not our style of government or governance. That we will be in the villages, in the regions, in the far-flung areas, in the back dams. And that is what we are doing with our president leading the charge up front. So that style of governance will continue as we continue in office. So the first important issue that I want to address is local government elections. It is now public knowledge that local government elections are due by law, and the country has a duty to comply with the law which requires the holding of local government elections. The Elections Commission, after some dilation, seems to be on a track to deliver those elections. The time for so doing has already expired. But what we are witnessing is the constant and persistent attempts by the APNU AFC commissioners to delay, detain, and dilate those elections from taking place. So every opportunity they get at GCOM, they put up roadblocks and obstacles and hurdles in the path of GCOM. The government commissioners have been forced to compromise almost every position that the government holds on these matters because of our intent to have the elections held. And here it is. APNU, AFC, for whatever reason, have been deliberately and strategically employing tactics to delay and prevent these elections from taking place. Today, GCOM finalized a work plan which fixes a schedule for all activities required for the elections to take place at a specified date. You would recall that the Minister of Local Government, as is required to do by law, had already fixed a date for elections because he was advised that GCOM was ready and a date was fixed. Because of APNU AFC commissioners' constant obstructionist behavior, that date could not have been met. And GCOM has finally today, after a long and arduous journey of battling with all the objections and hurdles that are being made and placed in its path, GCOM today approved a work plan. And imagine this had to be put to a vote, and the three APNU commissioners did not vote. They did not vote. They don't want the elections. These are the people. It is the same thing that they did after the 1994 local government elections. They started to agitate for local government election reforms. A bilateral team was set up. That team worked and did not deliver anything until 2011. This is a team between APNU, AFC, PNC, whatever you want to call them, and the PPP. And these two parties were working together. The reforms were slow. It didn't materialize. They were joining with the PPP every year to postpone these elections by a law in the National Assembly, because elections can only be postponed by an amendment to the law. And every year they supported that amendment. And then when they tasted power, that one-seat majority after the 2011 elections, they started to blame the PPP for not holding local government elections. And if you check them from 2011 to 2015, every single day, they criticized the PPP for not holding local government elections. They were participes criminis, if there was such a concept related to the non-holding of those elections. And now again, they are frustrating all efforts to frustrating all efforts to hold these elections. And then you will see how they will duplicitously and hypocritically turn around and say that the PPP didn't hold elections. These people are a mass. This is the kind of trick, this is the kind of artifice and trickery that they engage in. They are frustrating the process. And then you will hear them turn around and say that the elections were not held and that the government was responsible. I can cite so many instances of this type of duplicitous conduct. These are the very people who partnered with the PPP in 1997 to pass a law to say that every voter must vote with an ID card, a voter's ID card. And when they lost the election, they challenged the use of that ID card. These are the same two-faced, duplicitous people. That's the same thing they did. Partner with us to delay the elections, postpone the elections, and then blame it on the PPP. And they got their supporters believing that. I am going into this history, and I am spending so much time on this issue because I want the international community to appreciate what is going on. They obviously, they are not ready to go to the elections. And they will never be ready because they are in a state of chaos and confusion. And they will remain in that state for a very, very long time. So they don't want to be humiliated at the polls. So they're going to throw up roadblocks along the way to prevent the elections from taking place. Well, we are going to have none of that. Elections must go on. They can boycott if they wish. That's a matter for them. We can't stop them from doing that. But the elections must be held. The cycle of democracy must continue to spin. They can't win an elections. They would like to steal elections. And that is what they attempted to do in 2020. And the world caught them red handed. So they know they don't have a track record of winning elections. So they don't want to go to the elections. And that is evident by their non voting today to support GCOM's work plan. Anyhow, that's finished, and hopefully GCOM will proceed to implement that plan, which will result in local government elections as early as is reasonably practicable. I'll pause here to see what's going on the screen here. Krishna Dan Paul from Tushin, Akash Basdev, Ashraf Ali. As I said, I would like to make this program as interactive as possible. So if it is that there is anything that you want me to discuss, please feel free to send me a comment. Anta Dev Singh, Sharmila Budai, Suresh Sukhu, Motiram, Naniram, Soma Bipat, and so many of you, Joycelyn Hussein, Mark Modine, Gary Moore, Tilak Bikam, and so many of you. So that is where we are with local government elections. The other important issue that I want to speak about is Prodigy. Now, Prodigy has been in the news recently, and Prodigy, as you know, has sued the government, claiming that the government is withholding monies from Prodigy, and they have filed proceedings, and they have said they have been holding press conferences and have their lawyers on the TV and so on, and they are now saying that they want to meet with the government to end the impasse. Well, the government has no impasse with Prodigy. And perhaps let me use this occasion to edify the public on a couple of matters in relation to Prodigy and this money issue. So, firstly, it is the PPP government in 2014 that voted at the level of the United Nations for this decade to be celebrated in respect of African people. It is the PPP who voted in support of that resolution in 2014. That's the first point I want to make. So I make that point to put on the record that the PPP voted in support of this initiative at the level of the United Nations. And secondly, to use that to say that it cannot be, and it is not in the interest of the PPP to frustrate this initiative when at the highest level at the United Nations, it is the PPP that voted to support it. The PPP's interest lies in seeing this celebration achieve its fruition and its conceivable and conceived objective. That is our interest. This initiative, as I understand it, was for various policies and programs to be implemented that are intended and designed to improve the lives and livelihood of Afro persons of African descent across the globe, Guyana being not accepted. And we embraced that. We voted in favor of it. And when we got into government, we continued to put money even in an emergency budget. An emergency budget that was passed in September of 2020 after we got into government in August of 2020. Late because APNU AFC attempted for 5 consecutive months to steal the elections, notwithstanding that we were under severe pressure and constraints. We allocated and approved in the National Assembly $100 million for this initiative. If we were not interested, we could have used so many excuses for not putting that money in the budget and not disbursing it. We could have said that we are delayed, that is not an emergency item, that we don't have money because we inherited an empty treasury. We could have made up so many excuses that we had to deal with COVID and we don't have excess money. We said nothing of that sort. We committed the money and disbursed the money. We did the same thing in 2021 as well. But when we got into 2022, we began, and the money was budgeted for in 2022 as well. And for the record, it's budgeted again in 2023, further demonstrating the bona fides and the commitment of the government to the cause, which is a UN resolution, which we supported. So I want to make that no one must question or ought to reasonably question the government's commitment to this cause. I see attempts being subtly made to suggest that the government doesn't want to pay this money. If we don't want to pay the money, we will not pay it. Or we will not budget for it. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. We would not have budgeted for it. But we are budgeting for it, and we have budgeted for it. And we have budgeted for it again in 2023. So no one must be in doubt about our commitment and our support, our commitment to the cause and our support for that resolution. But we are a government. We are responsible for revenue collection, and we are responsible to the electorate and to the taxpayers for the manner in which those revenues that we receive in taxes and otherwise are spent. In fact, ministers are now liable under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act for misuse of public funds, and it is a criminal offense under the law. So constitutionally and legally, ministers have a responsibility. As a collective, the executive has a responsibility to ensure that public funds are expended responsibly and for the purpose for which they were allocated and disbursed. We have received reports from many Afro-Guyanese organizations across Guyana. And since the filing of the case, they have come forward, and I have spoken with some of them. And they have a very interesting story to tell. They have said to us, they have said to the Minister of Sports, they have said to other members of the government, and they have said to me that Prodigy was an umbrella organization that consisted of many small organizations across the country representing Afro-Guyanese. And then when they were told that this money is going to be disbursed to them, their Prodigy organization was then, without their consent and knowledge, converted by a few into a limited liability company, and a few persons were appointed without their knowledge, without the wider organization's knowledge, as directors of this company, and this board of a few begun to run the operations of Prodigy, and all the other organizations fell away. They were not consulted about this conversion from this umbrella organization into this limited liability company comprising of a few persons as directors, and they were no longer part of the planning and management of the organization, and they are not benefiting, and they have not benefited from the use of this money, and they don't know how the monies are being spent. And these are organizations that are prepared to put themselves on public record. In fact, they have approached the court, many of them. Some of these organizations have approached the court and have asked to join the litigation because they want to be heard, because they are claiming that this current construct, calling itself Prodigy, hijacked their organization and converted it into something that they now don't know and can't be a part of, and are prevented from being a part of. And when we look at the financial statements, when one looks at the financial statements of the Prodigy Incorporated, which the minister had to ask for, then it is reflected. $40 and $50 million per year is being spent on salaries. $6 million spent on refreshments and meals, and $343,000 on grants. Scholarship and training is 1 point something million out of 100 million. The running cost of the corporation, the running cost of the corporation is 90 million out of 100 million. Expenses, rents, expenses are eating up the money, nobody benefiting from this. I want to know who are being paid. Salaries to the tune of 50 million per year when you give in 1.6 million to scholarship and training. Oh man, people mustn't complain about this. And when they complain to the government, what you want the government to do? Turn a blind eye to this? A blind eye to this? And continue to dole out money to an organization that the ordinary Afro-Guyanese are telling you that organization is not representing us? That organization hijacked our organization. So, Prodigy must understand that apparently Prodigy doesn't represent the widest cross-section of Guyanese people. Certainly, Prodigy in its current construct. And that is simply the government's position. So I see that Prodigy wants to meet with me to mediate. The problem is, Prodigy believes that Prodigy in its current construct is the sole representative of Afro-Guyanese in this country. And therefore, Prodigy in its current construct somehow has persuaded itself that it is entitled exclusively to this sum of money. It's not going to happen that way. Government has to be responsible. So all the organization has to come to the table, and some modus vivendi has to be worked out. And that's the government's position. It is as simple as that. So, Ipadaji has been in the public domain speaking quite a lot. So I thought that I'll put out, and they have been saying that they want to meet with me, etc. I think the public is also entitled to hear what information the government has and what dilemma the government finds itself in. There is an organization called Ipadaji Region 10. And that organization is joining to be part of the case because they're saying that this Ipadaji here is not them. What do you do? What does a government do in those circumstances? And that is the predicament, unfortunate predicament, that the government is facing. So I thought that I'll put that on the record so that persons will understand where we stand on this matter. So it was drawn to my attention that a person was charged with the offense of motor manslaughter recently. An Essequibo driver was slapped with several charges in a hit-and-run horrific accident at Devonshire Castle Public Road, Essequibo, in the wee hours of Tuesday. The accident left 2 fishermen dead, and the person who was driving was charged with the offense of motor manslaughter. You would recall that early during the course of last year, we decided to change the law and implement and institute amendments to the Road Traffic Act and the Liquor License Act to create a regime of punitive measures to address this horrendous problem of carnage on our roadways. And I said that persons will take some time before they are acclimatized to the new regime. So I am happy that the charges have now begun to be instituted, and there are going to be many more charges, unfortunately, because we are a society that apparently do not learn easily. So 2 persons are dead, and that is what the law was intended for. This person was obviously, and the report says it here, was driving under the influence of alcohol. And we said that. So a whole regime of punishment will now be kicked in. And he will have to face the consequences of his actions. Hopefully, persons will see this, will see what this gentleman is going through, and it will have some impact upon their behavior. Hopefully, it acts as a deterrent, and they do not follow suit. So the law is working, and we are going to have many more of this, unfortunately. So this occurrence now, I see this week, And last week, no, this week, persons at two villages along our roadway, Hopetown and Buxton, have again chosen to resort to burning of roads, beating of people, burning of vehicles. And this is a serious issue, and it would appear that a pattern is being established. I saw the police commissioner speak about it. I reminded the police today that they had made a promise that the persons who robbed and beat dozens of people at Monrepo on the east coast of Demerara in the vicinity of the market, that those people will be charged for assault, whatever the offenses are, and whatever the damage to properties are, that those people will be charged. Months have passed, and those people have not been charged. I reminded the police today of that commitment. I heard the police commissioner again speak about this incident, these two incidents, and rightfully expressed his alarm and made certain statements. Well, a government will not sit idly by and allow any component of its citizenry to terrorize, to vandalize, to beat, to rob, and to execute terror against the general public. If that segment of the population, for whatever reason, feels aggrieved or feels that they are the victims of some wrong. Every day people feel that they are the victims of wrong. It cannot be, and civilized society will not allow, and a criminal justice system operating within a civilized legal system will not allow this type of behavior to perpetuate itself and to continue. And the most condign actions will have to be taken, in particular since this seemed to be consistent conduct. We have terrorism offenses which carry high penalty. Bail is not grantable unless special reasons can be shown. We have offenses which relate to the destruction of public properties and private properties that carry very punitive sanctions if those offenses are established to the satisfaction of the court. And these regimes in the law will have to be employed. And it is for the public good. Now, I am not for one moment advocating careless or dangerous driving or any form of unlawful conduct. I am not advocating that. But not because someone, whether he was driving negligently or recklessly, hits your car or hits someone, that authorizes any relative or any person or any grouping of persons to take the law into their own hands and seek their own form of justice. That is anarchy. Because if every segment of the population is to react that way when a crime is committed or when a wrong is committed, what do you think will happen to civil society as we know it in Guyana? And those persons who are using these occasions to do politics and to advance narrow agendas, the law also provides for them as well. So this is a serious development, and this type of conduct cannot and will not be countenanced at all, especially since it seems to be establishing a pattern. So let us see what will come out of these two incidents. And I don't care who has connection with whom, this conduct will not be tolerated. So let me see what views I am getting. Someone says that I'm holding a class. So I was hoping that I can get some questions, some views from you so that we can make the program interactive. Yes, someone is saying that the government needs to nip this in the bud. That is true. That's how it works in the jungle. Look, we have investors coming. Guyana is not this Baghdad mudland that some people think it is, or the way that it used to be considered and viewed. Guyana is now a modern, attractive destination for many things. Investments, tourism, and the world is looking at Guyana. Guyana is under the spotlight. And it is the responsibility, nay, the duty of any government in charge of the state to ensure that occurrences like this are dealt with in the most condign manner. And it's not a question of whether now is not a time where we don't have resources. No measure will be spared to ensure that this thing here is dealt with and dealt with properly. We can't, from the moment you allow this to slide, it is going to cause serious problems. And that is what I'm saying. I don't want to say much about it. It is still early. I have already said what I had to say about that previous incident at Monrepo on the east coast of Demerara. I came here and I made pronouncements based upon what I saw was ongoing. And those pronouncements were hollow. They turned out to be hollow. That hopefully will be corrected here. Will have to be corrected here. We simply can't continue in this manner. The laws are there and the laws are going to be used and will be enforced in the public's best interest and for the public good. If we have international investors traveling those roads and one of them is injured in one of these incidents, and that news goes, do you know the impact, the damage that will do? The damage that does to a country? And we are not going to allow this kind of barbaric violence to continue to plague our roadways by disgruntled persons. I don't know what their agenda is. I don't know what, if they have an ulterior motive, if they have a political agenda, I don't know. I know the last time we had this type of incident at West Coast Berbice Road, when the Henry boys were unfortunately killed, the leader of the opposition went up there, Joe Harmon, and I believe former President Granger. And the day after, the very day after, the mayhem begun in Berbice. Something will have to give, because this will not be countenanced and tolerated. It will not. My operator is signaling to me that we are running out of time, so I want to, before I close, I was in Grenada over the past few days, and I know that Grenada is celebrating their independence today. I met some wonderful people in Grenada, as well as some wonderful Guyanese, and they are celebrating independence in Grenada. They hosted me, and they are very hospitable, kind people. It made me feel very much at home in Grenada, both Grenadians and Guyanese, and I want to thank them very much for that, and I want to extend to all Grenadians happy independence. Grenada is a beautiful island, beautiful blue waters, small island but very, very pretty. And to all Grenadians, happy independence. This is where I have to say goodbye, and I will be with you next week. Please join me for another program of Issues in the News, where we continue the important discussions, discussing and ventilating the important issues taking place in our country. Be safe, enjoy the rest of the evening, take care, and I'll see you next week, Tuesday, to continue this discourse. Thank you very much for your time and attention.